The ancient Egyptians believed that an individual died twice. The first time when their last breath was drawn, and the second time when someone uttered their name for the last time. I like that formulation. I like the fact that someone's legacy lives on in them in that formulation. That's what it's saying, really. It's when, as long as your name is known, your legacy lives on. Although I would take it further and say that you die a third time, and that's when your influence is gone completely. Because I think that even when people stop saying your name, your influence is still there. It's not often, like, we don't know cavemen's names, we don't know the name of the person who invented fire or who initially learned to master fire, and yet their influence can be felt everywhere. It's led us down the path to having central heating, I think, to have an alternative to using fire all the time. It's allowed us to conquer the world with the guns we've got, to use firepower. It's allowed us to burn coal to, like, as a more efficient heat source than wood. It's allowed us to do many things. But I digress. The subject of this video is to talk about the impact that an individual can have on the world. And I'm going to talk about the poem Ozymandias, or Ozymandias, or however you would like to say that name. I've heard it pronounced many, many ways, so I'm going to stick with Ozymandias. Now, in that poem, the writer, I'm sure you all know it, in that poem, the writer basically makes 2 points in my opinion. The first one being that to draw real meaning from your life, you have to have strong interpersonal relationships. And the second one being that once you die, the legacy that you've left behind doesn't matter anymore. All that matters is how you've lived your life as an individual. I don't really agree with that. I agree with the first point of drawing meaning from interpersonal relationships. However, the second point I feel is flawed. And to show you how I think it's flawed, I've already given you the example of the person who first mastered fire, and I'm going to give you a couple of other examples. The first and most important being this man, who was Julius Caesar. I like to have props. Julius Caesar, as I'm sure you all know, was the first de facto emperor of the Roman Empire, although at that point it was the Roman Republic. Starting out as a frontline soldier in the legions, he rose through the ranks in his 20s to be the second in command alongside Crassus, the richest man in Rome, who was trying his hand at being a general, and Pompey, the most well-respected general of his time in Rome. And each of those two men had something the other lacked. Pompey was a great general and a great commander, but didn't have the money that Crassus had, and Crassus was basically Bill Gates of his time, but he wasn't a great commander. And Julius Caesar had a great political acumen. He had a very keen mind when it came to pulling the levers of power. So he thought, these guys should work together, but they don't like each other. So he formed the triumvirate, and he got himself and the other two together, Crassus and Pompey. He got the three of them together to discuss the alliance that they would have. Crassus and Pompey would use the power that they have to get Caesar to be consul, the most powerful office in the Roman Senate, and in return Caesar would push through bills that favoured Crassus and Pompey once he had that power. They did this, and he did what was asked of him. He pushed through the bills that Crassus and Pompey wanted, and he found himself becoming increasingly tyrannical, and the Senate didn't like that. So when his time to be consul was done, he was not put back in the office, and he was the governor of, I forget which province. I'm sure it was a province in Spain. It was Hispania Ulterior or something. But he was the governor of a province, a kind of backwater province, and he decided that what he was going to do was invade Gaul. And Gaul is modern day France. And Gaul had been a thorn in the side of the Romans for hundreds of years at this point. And at the time, when generals wanted to invade somewhere or go on conquest or start a war, they had to have the approval of the Senate. And any Imperator Rome players will know the feeling of wanting to start a war, being in a perfect position to start a war, and the Senate, there's one seat, it's 39 seats out of 40 required. You can't go to war until the Senate ratify that. But Caesar didn't care about any of that. He just invaded Gaul, conquered it all. I'm sure you know the Gallic campaign. He wrote a book, he wrote some commentaries on Gaul, he wrote about Vercingetorix and all that. The Battle of Alesia, all that stuff. Probably pronouncing that terribly, so correct me in the comments. And any details that you know that if I'm getting anything wrong in this, correct me in the comments, please, because it's been a while since I've looked over Julius Caesar's story. So this is all off the top of my head. He then, once he had conquered Gaul, the Senate called him back to stand trial for disobeying the Senate and going against what they had said and the customs of the Roman Republic. And I'm about to tell you about the Rubicon. The Rubicon was a small river, we're not actually sure where, but somewhere in northern Italy anyway, where it was legally the case that if a standing army with a general at the front of it crossed the Rubicon, they would officially be declaring war on the Roman Republic. Caesar did that. Caesar crossed the Rubicon and was technically marching on Rome at that point. It's incredible, really, when you think about it, when you think about how far back in time this was, and there were still people that were like, I'm going to do it anyway. And he, from that point on, was in a state of civil war with Rome. It was basically against Pompey, who had been his old ally, and eventually he won. The Egyptians killed Pompey. He eventually won the civil war, and basically from that point on became the de facto emperor. He declared himself dictator for 10 years, which was previously an office that had only been held for 6 months at a time, and every 6 months it was reviewed, and then if it wasn't needed anymore, then it was taken back, because the Romans had a fear of kings. So he declared himself dictator for 10 years, and about 5 years into that he was like, I quite like this power that I've got, and made himself dictator for life, which was the first time that had ever happened since the Roman kingdom, which ended in 510 BC, sorry. And eventually, I mean, if that wasn't enough, if the Romanization of Gaul, meaning that the Franks with Charlemagne and all that, in the Middle Ages weren't starting from total scratch to build up their civilization. They had the previous examples of the Roman Empire, and Britain as well, the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms in Britain. They had the previous examples. You had the formation of Scotland and like the Scottish culture of like basically you can take our lives but you can never take our freedom, to quote a terrible inaccurate film. But to quote, like, to start off that process of Scottish radicalism being about individual sovereignty, really. The Roman Empire had huge ramifications on the formation of the modern world. I mean, there's a reason that Latin is still the legal language. But if that wasn't enough, he then went and got himself assassinated, which sparked Shakespeare's mind and the minds of the creators of that Netflix show, Rome, Rise of Empires, Rome, which is the first series is about Julius Caesar. I mean, he even has his own Netflix special. He's on the same level as Amy Schumer. So, dizzy heights now. But if that wasn't enough, he got himself assassinated, which sparked another civil war and the total dissolution of the Roman Republic and the formation of the Roman Empire, which had all the lasting effects that I have already mentioned. It stretched from the Firth of Forth at one point to the Persian Gulf, down into North Africa, Spain, and at one point they had Germany as well. They had quite a substantial portion of Germania. And what if we discounted the legacy of Pope Urban II, the man who sparked the First Crusade, and all the crusades from that point on, and the People's Crusade, and that revolt on the Rhine that led to a load of dead Jews? Like, the amount of impact that Pope Urban II's speech at Clermont, which I will do a reading of tomorrow, the impact of that is beyond comprehension, really. I mean, what if they had discounted Jesus' legacy? Like, random guy that gets killed on the cross in somewhere in Syria, or somewhere in the Middle East, and the next 2,000 years are filled with holy wars, crusades, revolts, empires based on Christianity, the formation of the modern West, and like Muhammad as well, same deal there. Like, what about Narmer, the first guy to unify Upper and Lower Egypt, to unify a country that is still going today, that had, like ancient Egypt, the culture lasted for 3,000 years before the Romans overtook it. What about Ada Lovelace, the first, like the woman who was initially, along with her husband, I can't remember his name, but he's known as the father of computing. Like, they were the first to realise the potential that computers had for storing information, for communication and stuff. So it's like, think of the impact that computers had on the modern world, that computers have had on the modern world. I wouldn't be able to speak to you just now in the capacity that I am if those two people had not existed, along with a whole host of other people. But I could go on and on. I like the Egyptians saying, I like the fact that they think that if you die twice. I would go further than that. And while I agree with Ozymandias that stone decays, the craters left by individuals only fill up with the fruits of their labour after death. And that is the legacy of human beings. Thanks very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe, watch the big show, share the video, because I agree with Count Dankula, doing YouTube unmonetized is like playing it on hard mode. So thanks very much for everybody who does like and subscribe and share and comment. It all helps. Thanks very much for watching. I'll see you in the next video.